When it comes to black and white digital photography, there are 3 sliders in Lightroom that can either bring your images to life or they can completely ruin them. So today I'm going to take you through a full black and white edit on 2 recent photographs, one of mine and one of Sarah's, and I'm going to focus on these 3 sliders and I'm going to show you how, when and why I use them. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Jeff Ascoff and I've been using Lightroom professionally since 2010, and I've edited and printed many hundreds of images for exhibitions, publications, competitions and advertising. I've also had the privilege of editing and printing Sir Don McCullum's early digital photographs using Lightroom as my primary tool. Now, black and white digital photography is really my speciality, so let's dive into these images and see what we can create. Now, this first photograph is one of my favorites from last month. It was taken at the Blackpool Air Show, and I have a video from that day which I'll link to in the description below. Now, this photograph is a really good example of a low contrast scene which can either be brought to life or completely destroyed by these 3 little sliders here in the present section of the develop module. Now, some folks have asked what the difference is between them. Now, to give you a very basic Jeff Ascoff understanding of what the difference is between these sliders, let's zoom in and let's have a look at clarity. Now, clarity is basically a contrast adjustment that targets the mid-tones in an image, these sort of areas here. If I move clarity to the right, you can see the image starts to come alive. Okay, it starts to add contrast in those areas. If we look at this area here where we've got salt on the outside of the bus shelter here, if we push this clarity slider, it does a really good job of adding a lot of tone and a lot of structure into that area. If we move the texture slider, can you see how that really fine detail has been brought out a lot more clearly than with the clarity slider? Texture kind of targets the finer, really fine detail. Clarity kind of targets a much more broader amount of detail. Dehaze is essentially a tool which will allow you to bring detail out in situations like a foggy day, for example, or if you've got a very flat sky, which is where I see it used the most. You know, you can bring detail out in a very grey, overcast, flat sky. If you use it subtly in areas where you've got big, open, kind of flat areas of tone, it can work quite well, but the trick is to use it very subtly. Let's have a look at this edit in full, and I'm going to start off very quickly by changing the profile. If you are a subscriber to this channel, you will already know this. I always use profiles to make my initial conversions, whether it's from color to black and white or if it's to enhance an already black and white image. I'm going to use one of my SILVERCHROME profiles, and I'll leave a link to those in the description below as well. And I'm going to use P32, which works really well with my Leica M monochrome, and as you can see already, it's made a massive difference to the actual quality of this black and white conversion. Now, if we zoom in, we can see we've got a lot of detail, a lot of texture in this particular glass area going around the bus shelter. We've got I don't even guess what that is. It doesn't look particularly good. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to straighten it, just crop it a little bit. I shot this from eye level, I didn't shoot this from the hip. I actually brought the camera up to my eye on this one, but rangefinder cameras always give you a little bit more around the edges than you actually saw when you took the photograph. When I actually took the photograph, it was much more like that. What we want to do is set our black point. It's very important in black and white that we have blacks actually in the picture. So this is setting the black point. Now, I often do this by using the option button on a Mac keyboard. You can do it by activating the clipping feature here. So all these areas in blue now are clipping. They will go to pure black in the final image. I just want those areas to be where they would sit naturally as pure black. So the deepest shadows basically. Okay, and I'm happy with that. Now I can see on my histogram here we've got a bunch of detail all the way up into the highlights. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull the highlight slider down. Okay, and we should start getting some of that detail back, and as you can see, we've started to get detail already in the glass, which is great. We can also use our white slider if we want to. That's going to flatten everything off a little bit, but I'm not so concerned about that at this stage because we're going to adjust the contrast in a little while. I'm just going to turn that off because that's a little bit annoying. Let's just balance this exposure a little bit. If I take a brush, okay, and I'm just going to increase the size of the feather a little bit, and I'm just going to paint this area in here, okay, and I'm just going to go down to my curve and just pull my curve down. I'm going to take again another big brush. I'm just going to paint over. It doesn't matter if I paint over the shadow areas, the posts, and go into the tops of the people's heads and everything here. I'm not worried about that at this stage. All I want to do is try and balance the image first of all. So again, I'm going to take my curve and I'm going to pull that down. As you can see, it looks starting to look really good. The more I move my point to the right of the histogram, the more it's going to affect the highlights. Now you can, if you want to, just put an anchor point in the middle of the graph here and just pull that area down, and that won't affect anything too much below this point. If you put another one here, it definitely won't. Okay, and I'm kind of happy with that. That's pretty good. I want to bring the detail out in this area here, okay, but I don't want to go mad on the sky. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take another brush and I'm just going to paint crudely. I always do this. If you're subscribed to this channel, you'll know this. I basically just do everything by a brush. I'm not too fussed if it's accurate or not, because when I was printing in the darkroom at the start of my career, part of the charm of a good black and white print was the fact that it had this almost handmade quality to it. And I think sometimes digital can become very cold and very sterile. So I like to keep that within my work. So I'm going to go down to the effects section. They call it, this is what really helps with Adobe, they call it presence in the main basic panel, but when you come to using a mask, it's called effects, just to be helpful. So I'm going to move the clarity slider and see what happens, and just look at that. The whole image just comes to life. I'm just going to take the clarity slider off and just show you what happens if I use the texture slider. It doesn't have the same impact as the clarity slider. So if I move the clarity slider again, you get this really nice impact. If I use dehaze, we'll try dehaze just to prove a point. That's just horrible. So I'm just going to use clarity again, just to about there, nice and subtle. I want to bring out the detail and the texture in the roof here, and also along these pillars. So I'm going to take another brush and I'm going to paint this in. Again, I'm not overly worried about it being too crude. Run it all the way down. This time I'm going to use the texture slider, and I'm just going to bring that out. And you can see immediately, if I zoom in just to show you how natural that looks. Okay, now to kind of finesse it a little bit, I'm just going to take a really, really big brush. I'm going to drop the image down off the screen because I really want to just use the real edge of the brush here. Okay, I'm just going to go all the way in and around like this. I'm just going to bring it down a little bit. Okay, which is very cool. Let's come back up to fit. Okay, and then finally what I'm going to do is add some grain. So I'm going to use push grain here. It's probably a little bit too much, so I'm just going to back it off a little bit. And then one final thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to add a little bit more contrast to the image. I have an adjustment masking preset which I made in an earlier video, which again I'll link to in the description below. Basically it creates a blank mask which you can then add a contrast curve to. Okay, and I'm just going to go and do that. That's it. I'm happy with that. That's it, pretty much done. Okay, so we're going to look at this picture of Sarah's. Just straighten this picture, 28mm lenses and Leica cameras. Okay, and we're going to do a similar sort of thing with this one. This again it's similar to the other one, is that we're looking through kind of a glass or plastic in this particular case. It's at a county show. It's part of a milking demonstration which they do at this particular county show. I'm going to go straight into P32. If you're starting off with a color image, then all you need to do is go and use the monochrome profile to convert your image to black and white. And again, I've covered this in a lot of videos on this channel. So if you want to know all about that, have a look at the Lightroom playlist which we've put together, and it will take you through all of that. So what we're going to do here is just adjust the exposure. I'm going to do that using a tone curve. Then I'm going to go and set my black point. Okay, I'll do it with the little indicator so you can actually see on screen what's between black a lot more easily. So really just the real deep shadows underneath the shoe there, in the cowl here, okay, and the really deep shadows up there. I'm quite happy with those to clip. That's absolutely fine. If I have a look at my histogram, we've got some clipping going on here, so I'm just going to bring my highlight slider down. Okay, I'm just going to back it off till it disappears. There we go, that's great. What we want to do with this is bring this cow out, because it's a little bit dark at the moment. We want to bring this one down a little bit, and we also want to bring the people out in the picture. So again, exactly the same way as the previous shot, I'm going to be using brushes and the clarity and texture sliders. I'm just going to zoom in. So I'm going to use the brush here, and I'm just going to crudely paint around the cow. As I said before, I'm not worried about going over different areas and this kind of stuff. It doesn't bother me at all. I don't think that's even an issue. I'm going to go down to my texture slider, and I'm just going to push it. Okay, let's just get rid of that. Let's see what it's doing. Okay, I'm just going to push it to the right. So if I go back again, you can see how the fur comes out. Brilliant. In the early days of Photoshop, we had to work out ways of doing this in Photoshop. It involved different kinds of actions and layers and God knows what, but Lightroom is just so simple. It's such a simple way of doing things, and it works really well. Okay, now while we're on this cow, I'm just going to take another brush. I'm going to bring his horn out a little bit here. That's a she, isn't it? Bring her horn out. And again, I'm just going to lift that area. Cool. And I'm just going to bring her eye out as well. So I'm just going to lift that area there as well, and maybe nose. Okay, and maybe the back of her fur here as well, and round her eye. Okay, that's lovely. Right, so let's moving on. Let's have a look at this this cow here. Now I'm going to be again using a brush. Now what I got to be careful of is we've got all these pipes here. I don't want them to become too dominant, so I'm just going to be a little bit more careful about how I paint around this. And I'm doing this in kind of blotches, so I'm just pressing my mouse button down. I'm not actually brushing as such. I'm just creating a series of blotches, I guess is the right, that's a technical term. We're going to go to clarity, and I'm going to push it. There we go. Because it's a white cow, the clarity is going to make it a little bit too light, so I'm just going to use my curve just to bring that area down again. Okay, and I'm just going to zoom out and see what that looks like. Okay, cool. And if we go and have a look here, let's turn it on and off. Yeah, that's much better. Okay, so moving on, guy here. Big brush stroke. Now we can, if we want to use dehaze here, because it's quite a crude, I guess, figure. You know, it's not very distinct. We can use dehaze, and you can see a little bit of dehaze goes a long way here. It just darkens him down and separates him a little bit from the background. We can also use clarity, okay, which I actually prefer. I think that looks a little bit more natural, but you know, your photograph, you can do whatever you like, whichever way you want to do it. And I'm just going to carry that brush over to the woman here as well. Okay, just to bring it down. What I want to do is make sure this all looks natural, so I'm just going to feather around both of them so it doesn't look like I've used a brush. Okay, and just bring that a little bit along there. And that's looking really quite good. Now, this cow is still a little bit on the dark side over here, so I'm going to add another brush to it. Now, you could say, Jeff, why don't you just go back and hit this mask here and just alter that mask? Well, I just find it easier just to create a new mask than trying to find the mask and mess about trying to adjust it. It's just easier to put another mask in. That's just the way I like to work. Now, what I'm going to do here is use the shadow slider and just lift the shadows a little bit. I'm going to zoom in because I want to just check that we're not getting anything weird happening here. Yeah, we are. You see the way that it's starting to look kind of grey here and odd? Okay, that's not, so I don't want that. That's not what I want. So let's go down to our curve and just lift it. Now, can you see how much more natural that looks in the shadows if I do that than using the shadow slider? And this is one of the reasons why I prefer to use curves when I'm editing. And I've got a whole video coming on curves over the next few weeks, so make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that. Let's finish this image off. I'm going to come down here. We're going to get another brush. Just going to darken the area in here. I'm going to take another brush and go back over this area here. Okay, I don't want to make it look too weird. That's better. Okay, cool. And I'm going to darken this area down here. So take another brush. Okay, and then if you see, there has this kind of natural darkening going on in the background here, where you've got the light hitting this kind of barn area. So I'm just going to paint that on there as well. I haven't made another, but I'm just continuing the same brush through. Okay, that's starting to look really good. Now I'm going to add some grain, as we always do with black and white. I'm going to be using medium grain because this is what Sarah likes. Just going to zoom into 100%, and I'm just going to move the grain so I can just start to see it break up. There, I think. And one last thing, again, we're going to be using the adjustment mask. Click on the adjustment mask, and then I'm just going to take another contrast curve and just refine the contrast. Okay, and I'm quite happy with that. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to click the link in the description if you're interested in SILVERCHROME or any one-to-one tuition with Lightroom. And as ever, I'll see you guys in the comments.